Can you put out precision ammo using a progressive press? I know the tips and tricks that are going to help you get there. Let's take a look. The conventional thinking is if you want to load precision ammo, you're going to have to use a single stage press. And I am here to tell you that is not true. In fact, when I won my national championship in 2023, everything I loaded was on a Dillon Progressive. So I'm going to show you some tips and tricks, kind of walk you through the differences, and then we're going to go out and have some fun at the range. So first off, let's talk about a progressive press. At its core, that simply means that it's able to do more than one step at a time or pull, per pull of the handle, compared to a single stage press where every time you pull the handle, you're typically only doing one process. Now, the advantage, without a doubt, is that it is a time saver and an energy saver. You can do up to 4 steps on a progressive, in this case on the Dillon 550, sometimes more, like the Dillon 750 will do up to 5 stages. And that's going to let you pull the handle once, do 5 things instead of pulling the handle 5 times per piece of brass. And really that's where the time and energy savings comes in. I like the 550 as I'll say oftentimes when people say, what's the best progressive press I can buy all around? I typically am going to tell them it's the 550. Now, while I use the 750, that's because it is more of a volume-based reloader. But the 550, in my opinion, is actually an even better precision press. And that's because the brass is actually touching the piece down here that you can see this. It's below the shell plate. Whereas on the 750 and some of the others, you actually have an elevated shell plate and you can get just a little bit of deflection in that shell plate and you have to manage it a little bit differently. So I think out of the box, the 550 does the absolute best at setting that base of your brass to a really hard stop that allows the seating depth to be really consistent, your sizing to be really consistent. Everything about it, in my opinion, is just a little bit better on the 550. Not to mention, the 550 has the widest selection of cartridges available for its conversion kits, and it's going to be the most cost-effective. So for people who have a lot of different cartridges, without a doubt, the 550 is going to give you the most selection and the best bang for your buck. Now we're going to be using these Forster dies here. These are their Ultra dies, and they are in 7 PRC. I have some ADG 7 PRC brass laid out. I'm going to walk you through some of my little tricks for getting dies set up on a progressive. First, we're going to set up the full-length sizing die and get the powder measure so that it is dropping the correct amount of powder. You've got virgin brass. Why would you bother sizing it? Well, for one thing, I want to make sure that it is perfectly matched to whatever die I'm going to be using and possibly to the chamber as well. So in this case, I'm using these Forster dies. I want to make sure that the brass is going to match this chamber because these are the dies that are going to be used with this brass on an ongoing basis. So I'd like to see how it shoots having been sized through here. Now, you're probably not going to get a lot of shoulder bump. In fact, we're not really looking for any shoulder bump in this case. But what I want to do is set up the full-length die so that it is at least making contact everywhere and just giving it a little bit of love. And then what's going to happen is once we fired it, we might end up adjusting this a little bit in the future. So one thing about full-length sizing dies, they should never be set and forget. You always want to make sure that you're checking it to make sure your shoulder bump is still in the range that you want and that you're getting the movement on the body and everything else that you want. Another thing that I like to do, and on a lot of these dies, you're going to have a replaceable bushing. And so that's going to be right here. And what this is this is going to control the neck diameter on the brass. So it's going to shove up in there, and then that is going to constrict the neck down. And what's great about dies like these is that you can choose any number of different bushings to control your neck tension on it. So we're going to slide this back in. Let me just do this real quick. And yeah, so right here. And we're going to screw these in. So when you are using something with a bushing, I don't like turning this all the way till it stops because that's going to lock in that bushing. What I want to do is back it out about a quarter turn. And then if you listen real close, you're going to hear that. And that's the actual bushing in there rattling. And I like to have a little bit of float in there. One, because it's going to move how far it neck sizes up a little bit so that it's not going all the way to the base. It's just going to ensure that you're not doing anything to the shoulder in any way, or right at the shoulder there. And two, I just like to have that little bit of float so that if something's just a little bit out of whack, it's going to kind of self-straighten there. Now this is pretty simple, and we're going to use a time-tested method of raise the ram, screw the full-length die down until it touches. We're going to now lower the ram, give it about a quarter turn, and I am going to lock that in place. Now, again, remember, I am not trying to get any kind of shoulder bump right now. I'm just trying to feel some contact on the body, make sure that that is where we are good. And that's also going to bring the neck in a little bit. And I know this is pretty unscientific, but what we're gonna do is, because I don't have a micrometer for it right now, but what we're gonna do, or a gauge pin or anything, so what we're gonna do is we're just going to loosely measure inside here, and we are at about 276 on the inside. I'm now going to throw this in here. We do have an expander ball, which is kind of why you see a little bit of a hiccup in here. And now we are at 270, 281, so 281.5. So it definitely opened up with that expander ball, and that's really what I'm looking for. My bullet is going to be 284, so this is going to give me about 3,000 neck tension, which is exactly where I like things to be. So that means I've got this sizing die pretty much set up. Again, little bit of body, really no shoulder work. That's going to happen after we fire it, and then making sure that we are bringing that neck in a little bit and then expanding it back out with that ball. With that, let's go ahead and get the powder measure set up so that we're dropping the correct amount of powder. The Dillon powder measure is actually incredibly efficient. It works really well when you use it correctly. But before we do anything, make sure that you put a primer in your brass that you're going to be testing. So all of this brass still needs to be sized, and that's okay because we're going to be loading on a progressive, which means I want to save my energy for when I can use one pull to do multiple steps, but I can't do that till I get some powder in here. So we have a primed piece, we have a primed piece of brass. We're going to bring it over underneath the powder funnel. I just kind of threw this together. I don't know exactly where it's going to be right now, but let's just see here what we've got for a powder charge. And we can get a better idea here. My goal is to shoot for, in fact, let me look at my notes here. We're going to be loading 3 different charges, 55, 58, and 61. So I've actually gotten pretty lucky. We're at 54.67. Now that we know our charge is a little bit under, we obviously need to adjust our powder bar so that it is letting more powder through. To do that, I'm going to take my 7/16 socket here, and we are simply going to screw it in clockwise a little bit. I don't really have a good gauge for this, but I'm going to say it's like 2 or 3 turns, like twists, not full rotations. But what we can do is we can take a little bit of a sample here. And the one thing to remember is I never want to base my final charge on this first sample. I just want to make sure I'm close. And then I'm going to take a couple sample charges to make sure that the charge has, really set in here on the charge bar that we were using. So let's see what this looks like. 55.09. Okay, so I like where that looks. Now that we have the powder set up and of course our full-length sizing die, we need to take a wrench, we need to loosen this die ring, and we're going to adjust our seating die. So let's take a piece of brass. We are going to go ahead and do the first 2 steps here. Okay, and I always like to make sure the priming seating is doing its job. So we're going to give it just a little extra push there. Now we're going to get some powder, okay? And then we're going to move it over. And what I want to do is I simply want to put a bullet on, and I'm going to raise this up, and I don't want to feel this. So I felt it make a little bit of contact. I want to keep raising it until my handle falls without anything happening in here. Now I'm going to turn this die down, and I can feel it making contact on there. And I'm just going to snug it up a little bit, and yeah, that's right about there. And then I'm kind of looking to see, do I have a little bit of extra room in there? And I do. I'm not hitting the shell plate, so I'm going to turn it down just a hair. And now I'm starting to just seat the bullet a little bit. So I'm just going to come down. We're just going to set it there for a second. And now I'm going to go ahead and take a measurement. Now my goal would be 3.375 overall length on these 195 EOLs from Berger. I am at 3.52, so I do need to come in a little bit. And because I'm going, it's going to be a couple hundred thousandths, what I'm going to do is raise this up. I'm not feeling anything. I'm going to loosen this ring and then screw down a little bit more. Okay. And I bet you we get pretty close feeling in there. So 3.375 is our goal. Well, we're still at 3.49, so I have a little bit of work to do. And I'm not hitting the shell plate yet, which is why I'm still using the big threads to make my adjustment. Okay. So let's see how that measures now. 3.365. So I need to be, what did I say? I need to be about 40 thousandths longer. So at this point, now that everything is locked down here, I'm going to find my, it's probably in the worst place for doing this on camera, but what I'm going to do is, since I can't really see the, it's perfectly right on this back side here. So what I am going to do, it's hard with these lights right now, but what I'm going to do is I just take a bullet sometimes and I hold it where the micrometer is. And so I want to come out 40 thousandths. So I'm just going to hold this. So there's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and 40. Okay, so that's going to get us really close. Now this bullet's too long or too short already. So I'm going to put it aside. It'll just be a blow off and whatnot. So I'm going to start another one here. Okay, let's get some powder. And we're going to move it over. And now we get to see where we are at. I might have been a little overzealous on that, 3.387. So we're going to come back, let's see, right about there. Now, this one, because it's a little bit long, we can work off of. I don't like doing that for like a final test, but 3.370. So it's funny because I went an extra 5 and thought, well, we'll see what happens. So right in there is probably going to where I want to be. So again, I have an extra long one. Now I do this on purpose because I'm going to need to foul out the gun and do everything before I do my test anyway. So it doesn't matter if you have some that are just a little bit off, if you will. Now this is a fresh case. It hasn't been pushed on a couple times, so it's really a good gauge of what the actual measurement is. 3.374. And honestly, considering I'm just throwing together a load, I'm going to take that. So now, in 3 rounds, we have set our seating depth. And again, that's really easy because of that micrometer top on there. We're going to work on the next step in just a second here. What I'm going to do now is just run the press as it's meant to be done in a progressive form, sizing, priming, powder, seating, all that good stuff. And we're just going to move through. And just like that, we have ourselves 3 blow-offs, and then we have 10 rounds of 55, 10 rounds of 58, and 10 rounds of 61. I'm pretty excited to shoot this. I happen to like 7 PRC. I know I haven't shot it a whole bunch, but I don't really find that it's that harsh of a cartridge to shoot, and I'm pretty excited to see what I can do at 100 yards with these, and you know, see what kind of groups I can get. With that, let's head up to the hill and go have some fun. So for this test, we're going to be using a bat action and an Ultradyne stock. This is a pretty cool setup that Gavin put together, and I'm pretty excited to shoot it because I just don't have a lot of exposure to this kind of stuff. So this is just to kind of feel out the gun. I have not shot this gun before, so. All right, well, that felt pretty good. So now we're going to shoot 5 of the 55 grain ones, yeah. So that's freaking awesome. I had one, I think it was the second one, I was a little flinchy on. And it showed up on target, but man, those other 4, I mean, they're just like one whole group. And that's what I expect out of my competition ammo. If I can do that with hunting ammo, that's even better. And these are those 195 Elite Hunters. Now this is going to be 58 grain. So that last load was on the lighter end. This is sort of a middle load. That's a good group. Wouldn't be my first choice. I think that first batch definitely shot better. Now we are on the 61 grain loads, and we're going to be shooting the bottom right. All right, well, you know, we had one outside and then 4 that are just super, super tight. We probably need to let it cool for a few minutes before we shoot the next 15. But I'm going to try something a little bit different on these rounds. I'm going to load them one at a time instead of through the magazine. Again, I loaded maybe a little bit longer than you would normally load for like a hunting load, only because that's kind of what I'm used to. And obviously, I found that the feeding lengths probably should have been just a little shorter. Okay. So this is back to our 55 grain. And we are going to be shooting the upper left now on target 2. So I think we have maybe 3 of them. Like it's really not a pretty group, I'm not gonna lie. All right, so we're on the upper right now. So a little bit of width to that group. It's not the prettiest, but it's definitely tight enough. So I'm shooting the middle now. And this is my 61 grain load again. But that's going to be a nice little group right there. I mean, all 5 are touching on that one. And I mean, again, not as pretty as the groups when the bore was a little colder. We went and grabbed the targets, and you can see, so here is the first target. This was my sighting in, just making sure the gun was good. And then we went, and here are the 3 different groups. And you can see there's definitely a theme, right? Like, I had a little trouble behind the gun. It's not something I'm used to. There were 4 rounds on all of these that were really tight, and then 1 that was always kind of up here at like a 10 o'clock mark. But this is phenomenal. Like, to load this kind of stuff without knowing anything about the cartridge on a Progressive, right? Like, I have a ton of confidence, but I know a lot of people don't think you can do that on a Progressive. And so you can see like a throw together load is great. Now, we let the gun cool down a little bit, and you know, you can tell it's a little breezy up here, but it was still pretty warm when we started this second round. And it definitely heated up faster because that's what it's gonna do. But you can see that our groups, not as pretty here, and then we went here and here. And you can see that the groups are good. They're not phenomenal, but here's what I will tell you, a little secret. So this was cold, this was hot, and if you look, here is the 61 grain load right here, if I remember right. It was one of these two. Anyway, they're both really tight, right? And then this was the 61 grain load with a really hot barrel. So what does that tell me? It tells me that's a really stable load. If I was just going off nothing other than my groups and I needed to get something out there for the field, 100%, I'd be at 61 grains, and I know whether it's ripping hot or cold, I'm gonna get some tiny, tiny groups. And that's one of the reasons I love doing tests like this, because you can just really simply get some results like that. So at the end of the day, I think this kind of puts to rest the whole, you can't load precision ammo on a Progressive. Well, you know what? I can, you can, lots of people can. So go out there, have some confidence, pick up a Progressive if you want, load some precise ammo, and go have some fun. With that, we're out of here. I'm heading back down the hill. You have a good one. We'll talk later.
I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, where we've got unrestricted content, and Instagram. Make sure to follow us on all those channels. Ultimate Reloader also has a commercial solutions division serving law enforcement, the military, and the gun industry. We have some unique capabilities, including a comprehensive suite of recoil testing and evaluation capabilities, trigger profiling, and more. If you're interested in custom rifles like what we build here on the channel or gunsmithing services, you're going to want to go to rifles.ultimatereloader.com and get on the wait list. If you want to learn lucrative gunsmithing like what I show here on the channel, including building custom rifles and Cerakote plus a whole bunch more, you're going to want to check out the Colorado School of Trades, schooloftrades.edu. Thanks again for watching.